Welcome to a Christian Forum for Israel-Palestine. I'm Ross Wagner, a professor of New Testament at Duke Divinity School, and I'm joined by Gary Burge, professor of New Testament, retired but still teaching at Calvin Theological Seminary. And our guests today are two other members of the forum, David Crump and Rob Dalrymple. David's ministry experience began as a staff worker with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. He continued then as senior pastor of a church in Salt Lake City. After 10 years of pastoral work, he moved into the academic world, serving for 18 years as a New Testament professor at Calvin University. Now retired, David continues to do research and writing, focusing on the struggles of the Palestinian people living under Israeli military occupation. He's made numerous trips to Israel-Palestine. Each time he lives with close friends in one of the numerous refugee camps. David has written a number of books, including Like Birds in a Cage, Christian Zionism's Collusion in Israel's Oppression of the Palestinian People, and most recently, The Power of Myth, Israeli Propaganda and Christian Zionism. Welcome, David. I'm also pleased to introduce Rob Dalrymple. Rob has served as professor of New Testament studies and also as a lead pastor for over 37 years. He's taught at various universities, seminaries, and in local churches. He currently serves as the executive director of Determined Truth, a nonprofit whose vision is to equip followers of Christ by providing sound biblical teaching through a variety of media to challenge the church to be the church. Rob's a leading voice in the evangelical world on matters such as Scripture and the Middle East. He's written a number of books, including Land of Contention, Biblical Narratives and the Struggle for the Holy Land, as well as These Brothers of Mine, a biblical theology of land and family and a response to Christian Zionism. Mm-hmm. Welcome, Rob. Gary, you'll start us off.
Yeah, this is great, Rob. David, I've been looking forward to this very much. So everyone who gets close to this issue on Israel-Palestine has a starting point. And how did you two first become aware of this conflict? And did you have a turning point moment? Tell us briefly just what that was like for you when that happened. What was the open door you walked through and you knew there was no going back?
Well, I'll go first, I guess. I started studying what we can call the conflict, though that's not really a very good term for it, when I was teaching at Calvin University. I had been aware of what appeared to me a very inequitable, unjust situation in the Middle East, especially for the Palestinian people, for many years. But it occurred to me that even though I knew a fair amount about the ancient history, I wasn't very cognizant of the more recent history. So I began to do some research and reading to educate myself on that. And the more and more I learned, the more and more convinced I became that the Palestinian people were an oppressed people, being subjugated by a militaristic nation state that was occupying their territory. And having grown up in a very fundamentalist, conservative Zionist tradition, it struck me that my tradition was a collaborator in this oppression. And it occurred to me that I should try to do something to compensate for that, sort of pay for my past sins, as it were. So my wife and I, just to tell the story briefly, looked for a Palestinian NGO that we could work with. We wanted to go live in a refugee camp and teach English and try to make a difference with our own two hands and feet, pay our own ways so that we were not an imposition on anyone, and also begin to study Arabic while we were there. And eventually all of that came together, and it happened, and we lived in a refugee camp for a summer and made some dear friends that we've kept close to ever since. And that was the beginning of the journey for myself and my wife.
David, with this awakening, and as this happened in your own life and you began to talk about it, I'm sure you did, in your Christian community, how did the reception go?
Well, I mean, to just share one personal piece of information, when my book, Like Birds in a Cage, came out, my mother looked at it and read it and disowned me. So that tells you a little bit about what the nature of that reception was like. I haven't had a lot of talks with people from my specific church background, but from the conversations that I continue to have with Zionists, including my current church where I attend now,
Yeah.
where I have been attacked on stage while explaining the Palestinian circumstances, the reception is uniformly hostile.
Wow. Okay, Rob, about you? What door did you walk through that changed everything for you?
I don't have as noble a story as David does, but my story is just as I grew up Southern Baptist, evangelical, end times, end of the world, Christian Zionist by default, didn't know anything better. And I went to the land, and I went there for academic purposes, part of my PhD program. And I saw a few things like that doesn't make sense. You guys know what it's like when you're working on a PhD. You don't have time for thinking about other extraneous things. So, but 5 years later, I went back, and when I went back in 2008, I sat there on a bus and learned that there were Christians in this land, and there was a lot of them, and saw out the bus. I saw the wall. I began to see the oppression. I began to go, hey, this is not what I was told. This is not at all what I was told.
Right.
And my background in a biblical interpretation in the Book of Revelation, thinking I know exactly what's going on here. My clan, as David shared, my clan's driving this bus and is making this. It is what it is, and so that began my journey.
Like me, you probably felt it was hard to believe it's true, because what you were witnessing contradicted everything that you'd seen so far. So, David and Rob, you give us some idea of you've had a number of trips in the past, up to the present, to this year, going back and forth to Israel-Palestine, but you have just recently made a trip as well. What stood out to you on your most recent trip here in 2026? And did you feel like, my goodness, things have really changed on the ground? Give us some perspective of what you've seen now, which is current.
Yeah, I was there last May. I've been there sequentially for the last 3 years in a row, though I've made regular trips for the last 20 years. What I noticed this past May was a growing depression among my friends and the people that I lived with and circulated among. And I've noticed that for the last several years as I've gone, but this was the worst that I've ever seen it. One friend of ours, she's a nurse in a local hospital, and she told my wife the last time we were there together that the only time she finds joy is when she's at work, because that's when she's helping people. Otherwise, she goes home, crawls into bed, pulls the covers over her head, and just wishes the world would go away. The sense of futility, of the lack of a future, the lack of any hope, the lack of any expectations of change or improvement are rife just all throughout the Palestinian community that I'm familiar with.
Wow, it's grim. Rob?
Yeah, I just saw, just seemed to be a lot more depression, lot more. I met a young man. It's like, what are we supposed to do? Well, we can't do anything. We sit in our house all day and we can eat. That's all we can do. I go to the gym and work out a little bit, but we can't do anything. There's no freedoms. Just you walk by the shops, as you guys all know, in Bethlehem by Nativity Square, by Manger Square, and the heads are down. No business, very few tourists. And so, I'm just saying hi to people. And I was like, hey, and their faces lit up, which was really interesting as well. As depressed as they were, as overwhelmed as they were just so happy to see. I had dinner at a restaurant. I wanted to kind of frequent as many restaurants and businesses as I could. And I'm just sitting at a table by myself one evening, at the end of the day. And this young man just walks up to me and shakes my hand. He was just so happy to see me, but overall it's quite depressed. Yeah.
So just to be clear with our listeners, these experiences of distress would be equally shared with Christians and Muslims in Palestine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if you guys would talk a little bit about what you witnessed, just sort of the grind of daily life. Talk a little bit about a normal day's experience for someone living, let's say, in Bethlehem or one of the surrounding villages.
Well, travel is always an immediate threat because you don't know what's going to happen. You could easily be stopped or pulled over and arrested and They will arrest people regularly for no reason whatsoever. So, my friends let me know initially when I got there that we'd keep travel to the minimum, which I had already anticipated. I wasn't going to ask any of them to take me anywhere they didn't want to, because they didn't want to risk anything. I could tell you a couple of grim stories about a friend of mine who did try to travel. He is a fairly well-known human rights activist and gets invitations from various countries in Europe to come to speak regularly. The last time he tried to answer one of these invitations, Israel refused to give him an exit visa. So he couldn't leave, he couldn't travel, he couldn't go outside of his area in Bethlehem. A couple of other times when he's tried to travel away from his home, he has been stopped in his car, pulled over, taken into the neighboring police station, and beaten just for fun. A couple hours each time. And when he would ask them, why are you doing this to me? I haven't done anything. What's this about? He has spent time in prison in the past, again, for no apparent reason, other than that he tries to help Palestinian communities in need. But the answer he received to his question was, we do this to you because there's a new note in your police file which says that we are to interfere in your life whenever we have the opportunity. And so this was their idea of interference: pull him out of his car and beat him up for 2 to 3 hours whenever they had the opportunity. Not long after the last time this happened, he was also called into the Palestinian security station. And he was told that if he did not give up his humanitarian work, which consists of taking food and clothing and fire extinguishers to needy Palestinian communities being overrun by settlers, if he didn't stop that work, they were going to throw him back in prison again. Again, for doing humanitarian work, but it's helping Palestinian people, so it's against the law. Those kinds of stories could be multiplied many, many times over.
Yeah.
Rob, what did you notice as you looked around?
This is my seventh trip. I haven't been as many times as David, and it had been 9 years since I had been there before. And one of the things I wanted to see was, okay, what's changed? What's going on now? I knew things were worse. We all knew things were worse since the Gaza war began 3 years ago. We knew that it escalated. We knew the eyes were off the West Bank, and so that there. As we tell these stories, here's the first thing I think people need to understand, that is this. What David and I, and you guys have been there as well, what we can't do is tell you in a way that you can understand, like I can't understand, the trauma that they experience as a part of a daily, almost moment by moment part of their life. I can't share to you the anger, the frustration, the grief, the pain of what they're experiencing. So yeah, we saw it, we experienced it, but do you understand what it's like for, my guide, Usama Nicola was fantastic with me as well. But, Usama goes out. What is his wife thinking? Is he going to come back? Is he going to come? My kids go to school every day. Are they going to come home from school? Because we now know what is happening in their prisons, and they get arrested for 6 months or more without charge. So how do you live like that, knowing that your husband may not come home, that your kids may not come home, and that you won't know where they're going to be for 6 months or more, and you don't know what's going to happen to them? Right. And so, like David, one of my goals was to see what was going on. But I told Usama from the beginning, I said, we're not going to go anywhere that puts you in risk, in danger. We know that I'm an American. I've got a little bit of safety, but not as much as we used to have in the past. So danger might happen to me too, because I'm an American. But I didn't want to go there if Usama was going to be there. So if that was going to be a problem for Usama. But you understand. So I lived at Usama's parents' home. There was a one-bedroom place there in Bethlehem, about a quarter of a mile from the Church of the Nativity. And every moment of every day, you know that you live under occupation. Obviously, I don't, but I'm living in a place that's under occupation. You can't turn the water on to brush your teeth without realizing that you're using their water, and if it runs out, they're going to have no water to cook, clean, and do anything else to wash with. You take a shower you get in the shower, you turn the water on, it runs 35 seconds, hopefully you got yourself cleaned, and then you're out, because you can't use up their water supply. If you're not aware, Israel controls the water, they turn it on, and they don't know when it's going to turn, and then they fill up their water tanks, but they don't know when the water's going to be turned back on. So just anything that you do at all times, you know that you're under occupation. And I saw an intense amount of military presence, soldiers everywhere, all over Jerusalem and East Jerusalem as well. They're just everywhere. And so you're constantly, and then the barricades are up. So people might be aware of checkpoints where they check it, but they put barricades in these cities just all over the place. And so you're coming home and the road's closed. There's no soldier there. The road's just closed. You're in Beit Jala, trying to get to the other side of Beit Jala, or we were in, we were literally at an Orthodox winery, and the place that we wanted to go was on the other side of the barrier. Like, we had to go all the way around to go 10 feet from the barrier. The barrier didn't do anything. It didn't stop us from getting 10 feet away. We just had to go all the way around to get there. So, nightly raids. I'm getting text messages from Usama one evening because I was at the coffee shop by the Church of the Nativity, and he's like, "Are you home yet?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm home." "Okay." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because there's a raid in your area. I just want to make sure that you're home." So from this omnipresence of occupation, we couldn't go anywhere. We were a little bit restricted because they had decided to shut the gas down in Bethlehem area. So the lines were 2 hours or longer to get gas. The very first day, we drove by a gas station, and Osama said, and the Palestinians are arguing and yelling at each other. He says, "We are so traumatized that what happens now is," and this is what they want, "we're yelling at each other at a gas station." He says, "That's what they want. They want us to explode against each other." So it's just this overwhelming sense of, and hopelessness. I'm amazed that they still have hope, but it's.
What do you guys think is the long range? What do you think is the long range plan? What is the plan here? Is it like David said? It's about interfering with life so that people become so miserable and so despairing, they will leave or become subordinate, or what's the purpose?
Yeah, I would say it's both of those things, Gary. I think there's a deliberate intent to make life so hard and miserable that either people will leave of their own volition, self-immigrate, as some people would put it, or become so docile that they would no longer pose any kind of aggravation for the Israeli government. And there's a very clear intention, it seems to me, to basically consign the Palestinians to some restricted areas we could call reservations, where entrance and exit will be controlled, and they will live quietly so that the Israelis can go on their merry way. I think that's pretty apparent.
Yeah.
David, I'd add a third, and that is that it seems, and I think Gaza is the proof now, right? And that is, maybe you'll get so upset that you revolt, and that gives us reason to go ahead and come in with force, right? To go ahead and to ethnically cleanse, or do what we did in Gaza. You guys know we've been discussing this together as a group, and for years we've worked together. Gary, you've written books 20 years ago or more. When you have this conversation on Israel-Palestine in a church setting, in a whatever it might be, a webinar or whatever, you always had to be careful about making sure that you were judicious and cautious about how you went forward with the conversation. Mm-hmm. If you say something bad about Israel, you have to say, yeah, we condemn Hamas, and both sides need to get together to have peace, and both sides, there's problems on both sides there, and we see a couple of comments in the comment box. We'll do our best to get to them. Thank you for paying attention. But Gaza 3 years ago, what Israel's response, I think, showed their colors. I don't think Israel has any intentions for peace. I don't think they have any intentions for anything other than a one-state solution. That's clearly what Netanyahu's been doing since he tried to undermine the Oslo Accords back in the 90s. And the new, I didn't check out the name, I apologize, but the person who's leading in the polls now, I'm not sure what, the election's coming up pretty soon. His answer was, there will be no two-state solution if I get elected. Right. This just seems to be their objective. But I think, yeah, you're right. And I would add one thing, that is, if they want them to live on reservations, kind of being docile, those are really, really depraved conditions that they're living in. They're not going to be okay living. It's water restriction, you name it.
So let's go ahead and move to Gaza for a moment. Rob, you mentioned Gaza, and for our listeners who are a little bit newer to this, we've been referring to the West Bank, which is that area north and south and east of Jerusalem. which is mostly Palestinian, about 2 million Palestinians living there. But then in the far south, there's the area called Gaza, which has seen intense conflict and devastation for the last 2.5 years. So it's very hard for us to find out what is actually happening in Gaza. It's one of our frustrations again and again. You guys were there, not far from Gaza. In Bethlehem, there are a lot of people who are connected to Gaza. Is there anything you can tell us about what's happening on the ground in Gaza that we might not know otherwise?
Rob, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just trying to bring up a picture here if I can find it. Very good. Let me do this. Yeah, so I went. So the other thing that David discussed a little bit was the fact that the freedom of movement, the limitations of movement. So David went in through Tel Aviv airport. I went in through Amman, Jordan, for a couple of reasons.
Yeah,
But one,
so
I
did
had
I
a colleague
also.
that. What's that?
I went in through Amman as well.
Oh, that's right, you did. I'm sorry, David.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. All right, so we can both discuss the fact that just getting back and forth across the border is unbelievable. It's just not a fun experience, especially at the end of your journey. It's just not fun. They make travel as difficult, if not impossible, as they want to, as they can. So I went in through Amman and I spent some time there. But I had a colleague who was there who said, "Hey, I know some people from Gaza. We'll be able to meet with some Christians from Gaza." And I just assumed that meant that they were from Gaza 25 years ago. I had no idea that they were from Gaza recently. And so here's a picture of a woman that we met, Nada, the young girl there, and Saeda. And so I had no idea that we were going to get to meet them. I can't tell you her story without crying, but I'll do my best just to be brief. The little girl is a double amputee. I didn't want to take pictures of her lower body. Hey, can you stand? She's still smiling. Her brother and sister are with her. Her brother they didn't want to come. The brother stays in the room all day because he won't see anybody, like in his bedroom in the apartment. Right. The sister, they both have cuts all over their faces from the shard, from the fragments of the weapons, as you know how that goes. They drop these bombs that explode in air, and then what's the word I want, guys? Shrapnel. Shrapnel goes out and just cuts their faces up, and doctors are pulling 40 pieces of shrapnel out of their bodies. Well, their faces are all cut up. Saeda, the woman there, is not the girl's mother. She's the girl's aunt. Okay. Saeda is in Amman, Jordan, on a medical refugee status because the girl, Nada, has a double amputee and she has to learn how to use her prosthetics. And so she has to go back to Gaza and at the end of September. And she's like, "I'll go back, just stop the bombing." All right. But her story is real simple. She was living in the north or in the central part of the country. She was displaced 13 times. She was at the UNRWA school, if you remember that story there. And while she was there, she went to go get food for just a short bit for a few minutes to get some food.
Rob, what is the UNRWA school?
It's the United Nations Relief Works Agency. It's the United Nations School for.
So it's the United Nations School.
Yeah, United Nations. Yeah. In that school, every single room was filled. The basketball court, the playground was full of tents. I mean, it was packed. So she left for a couple minutes to go get some food, and for her family, to see if she could find some food because there wasn't a whole lot around. And while she was away for a few minutes, they bombed the building. She lost her husband of more than 25 years and 7 children. And she said, she was 15 years old when she married. She said, "I love my husband." She said, "I miss my husband more than I miss my kids." She said her husband allowed her to go to school. She got a college education, and then she started having kids. So those 3 kids that she's now taking care of are her brother's kids because her brother's tent was bombed, and he and his wife and 4 of the kids died. So now the kids have no parents, and she has no kids. So she's taking care of these kids, and her husband was killed 2 years ago, July of 2024. And I can't tell you the pain on her face. I can't tell you how much hurt she had, how much anger she had, how much suffering she had 2 years later trying to tell you the story as to what happened, I remember that she had told this part of her story about her mom. I was introduced, hey, here's her story before I met with her. I made the mistake of asking how your mom's doing. And she said, my mom's dead. When her brother's tent was bombed, her mom had a stroke. And she went to the hospital, but you know the hospitals, there's no place to care for a person that had a stroke. They said, we have no beds for you, we have no place for you, we can't get to you. And she had to watch her mom die. Yeah. And then I met, the day before that, I'm not sure, David, if you have something to share as well, but I met 2 young girls. They were academic refugees. They got to leave Gaza for school. They were in Jordan for Madaba, Jordan. They were taking a university. They had to sign a paper before they left that they will never return to Gaza. So they can't see their mom, they can't see their dad, they can't see their 15-year-old brother. They may never see them again. But the parents said, go, make a life for yourselves, have hope. They're in Madaba in school together. These are, Gary, you might know of them a little bit as well, because I remember when we were in November of 2024, 2023, we were in San Antonio. You had gotten a message from one of the churches up in the north that they were out of food. Well, these are the 2 girls that were in the Catholic Church. So if you're aware that the Catholic Church was posting every single day,
Right.
well, Helda was the girl that was posting every day. She was the one that was taking the pictures. And so I met her, her and her family. She said, what did you guys do for food? She goes, well, I remember just nonchalantly, as if it was nothing. She's telling me the story about how they had 1 can of beans for the 5 of them for that day, and just how do you share how do we understand these stories? How can we relate to this? We can't understand how. And David shared a little bit about, this is one story. This is one story out of 2 million people. So, yeah.
And we should remember that the killing has never stopped.
Yeah.
The killing has never stopped. Israel continues to kill people literally every single day in Gaza. Since the so-called ceasefire was supposedly put in place in October.
Of last year, yeah.
Last year, yeah. Records indicate that Israel has killed at least 1,300 people in Gaza since then. It's never stopped.
And Saeda said, she goes, I have to go back in September. She goes, I don't want to go back. She goes, if you stop the bombing, I'll go back. Just stop the bombing. And she just left in May. They're still bombing every single day. She goes, just stop the bombing. One of the things she said, I couldn't believe this statement. It's like, she said, if you just leave us alone, we will rebuild Gaza. Just leave us alone, right? And I'm like, I didn't say a word, but I'm like, how could you rebuild Gaza? I mean, it's rubble. But this is just their love for Gaza, the resolve, the strength of these people. It's unbelievable. These are incredible people. So.
Wow. Rob, you mentioned being in Jerusalem as well. There also are Palestinians living in East Jerusalem who do not have citizenship in Israel. They're Israeli-Palestinian citizens. What does it look like? I mean, you mentioned this wall and how you could be, 10 feet from one place to another, but have to go around. What is the experience of, first of all, Palestinians on the Israeli side of the wall? Is it better? Is it less pressure? Is there more freedom? Are they also feeling a clampdown on their daily life?
So I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. We're not talking about Palestinian Israeli or Arab Israeli. We're talking about Palestinians in East Jerusalem that are
in East Jerusalem.
Yeah. So I mean, no, you still feel the pressure. The IDF was everywhere around East Jerusalem. That wasn't normal. There's if you guys know where the St. Anne's Church is down the Via Dolorosa, the beginning of the Via Dolorosa there, and Ecce Homo. You come around the corner there, and there's a station right there. It's manufactured. It's barricades right on the street where 6 soldiers are standing 24/7, pretty much 24/7. And you walk down through the old city, and there's soldiers everywhere. So this omnipresence there, and then. To go anywhere, we didn't discuss this, but to go, so you guys, Ramallah, from where I was, I did this on the maps on my phone. It was 18 miles from where I was in Bethlehem to go see Pastor Muther Isaac. As you know, Muther's in Ramallah. 18.6 miles. Took me 4 hours.
Wow.
4 hours.
And what was your route? What was your route to get there?
Well, I took the bus. So that obviously that's going to make it a little bit longer. By bus, the Google Maps said it should take 2 hours. So I took a bus from Bethlehem through the checkpoint, and you have to get off the bus, and you have to go through the checkpoint, and all right, and then you go to Jerusalem, and then you have to get on another bus. You enter Ramallah. You don't have to stop at the checkpoint entering into Ramallah, and then I had to walk as well. But so it's a couple buses and a little bit of walk. But I showed you guys a picture. You want me to bring that one picture up here? Right? I can. I can do it. Might be a little clumsy here for a second, but this is a picture here. Let me go back to. Let's see here. Sorry, I'm just going to fast forward through this instead of having it all prepped. Sorry about that, guys. That's the gas lines there. That's just 2 weeks ago. There, the barriers on the road. It's not checkpoints, just barriers on the road. This is the picture I took. So that's my bus. You have to get off the bus as you leave Ramallah. You have to go through this little turnstile and a checkpoint. And the little girl made it through the checkpoint. And you can see her there. And her grandma did not. And so now she's crying. You can see her in this picture here. She's like, wait, she goes back. I got detained at the checkpoint. And by the time I got through the checkpoint, my bus had left. I had to wait for another bus. And then the bus, it's hell. They're trying to make your life miserable.
And to be clear, you could do this trip as an American, but if I were a resident of Bethlehem and wanted to go to Ramallah, I couldn't do this, right? I'd have to go another way around.
No, you couldn't go. You couldn't get out of You couldn't get out of Bethlehem. If you're a resident of Bethlehem, you have to go to Jerusalem from Bethlehem. You have to have a permission. So if you want to go to the Church of the Nativity or the Holy Sepulchre or Easter, you cannot leave. Yeah, that's correct.
So this Ross, you raised another important question. So as a person carrying an American passport, do you think your treatment is better, worse, suspicious, suspect? What, as you kind of move through these spaces, how does that work? Because we often hear Americans go over there and they say, gosh, I moved all over the place and I didn't see any problems.
Well, it largely depends on what you're looking for, I think, and whether or not you're going with an Israeli-sponsored tour guide or tour bus. They'll take you to places that will hide the occupation from you, if possible. I think that, as Rob mentioned, having a U.S. or maybe even kind of a foreign or European passport does give us a certain degree of protection. But if you watch the news much and see how many Westerners have been injured or even shot or attacked, particularly by settlers in recent years, that is changing very dramatically. And it's best not to count on that anymore. I mean, you could be subject to some kind of attack at any moment, regardless of your passport status.
Would you, both of you, please say a little bit more about settler violence? I mean, the U.S. papers are reporting on this now, and I've heard Israeli commentators call this Jewish terrorism. But what are we actually talking about, these settler attacks?
Yeah, I was really struck by the increased number of outpost settlements that I saw when I was there. Okay. One of my friends
tell us what an outpost is, David.
An outpost is a way that an unofficial settlement gets started. There are certain locations that are approved for settlement by the Israeli government, and technically anything started apart from one of those officially designated sites is an illegal outpost. But very, very rarely are illegal outposts ever shut down. They're typically allowed to continue to grow until they become an established settlement as well. A bulk of the attacks that we read about or hear about these days from the outpost youth or the outpost settlements, as they're called, are these illegal settlements where largely young, religiously oriented Zionists will set up an illegal outpost and take money from the Israeli government nonetheless and set up, trailers or containers, cargo containers of some sort or another, and begin to move people into these areas. I took a trip this time with my friend to the school where he teaches on the edge of the Judean desert. And I've traveled this route many times with him. This was the first time where I was really overwhelmed by the number of outposts that were springing up all along the route. And he would point them out to me, here's a new outpost, there's a new outpost, there's a new outpost. The road in and out of the village is now being surveyed by illegal settlers. They're trying to control the traffic going in and out of the road. It's the only access to this village, and the villagers themselves are now being restricted in their ability to travel and oftentimes attacked. Many of the shepherd boys have been shot by settlers. The settlers will steal their sheep and take them as their own. And when the people try to complain to the Israeli army about this, they go to the settlers. And of course, the settlers lie. They say the sheep are theirs. And the army always sides with the settlers. So there's a state-sponsored terrorist activity going on in the West Bank that I believe fully intends to annex the West Bank at some point in the future.
I was trying to put some numbers on this, you guys, and I think since October 7, 2023, now almost 3 years, there have been, is it true, like over 1,000 people who have been killed, Palestinians killed on the West Bank?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
That's an
And a recent UN report estimated that there's an average of 190 settler attacks against Palestinians per month in the West Bank right now.
Mm-hmm. That's just amazing, isn't it?
And so, someone from the U.S. vantage point might ask, well, why aren't the Israeli police or army doing anything about this? I mean, what recourse do Palestinians have when they're under attack? I imagine it's quite dangerous for them to respond violently, but can they appeal to authorities? Is there anyone there to help?
No, they have no means of appeal at all. As Palestinians, they're subject to military law. If they were to get a court hearing, it would be a military court where the conviction rate of Palestinians is, I've read, 97% or more. Palestinians never get a fair hearing. So the average Palestinian realizes it would just be a waste of time. If your son has been shot in the leg by a settler and all of his sheep stolen, and you've gone to the police in the past and they've always believed the settler story over your story, you give up pretty quickly on hoping for justice from Israel.
So who's carrying guns in this scenario? I mean, are the Palestinians well armed and threatening the settlements, or vice versa? Give us some perspective on who has power.
All of the power is with the settlers, as far as I can see it. They're the ones who are armed. They're the ones who have the backing of the government. I've been attacked not only by hilltop youth, but by settlers coming from well-established, long-established settlements who come out and attack Palestinians as well. And the state approves it all. In fact, it's official state policy. For those who are interested, I have an article that's going to be published in the next edition of a journal called the Journal of Holy Land and Palestine Studies, where I talk about this and tell a few more stories and provide the official state documents that authorize this sort of activity by Israeli citizens.
Do you both agree that most of us in the West are influenced by an Israeli perspective of events over there? If you're living in the United States, do you feel like the air we breathe is just saturated with an Israeli sort of perspective? We're looking through an Israeli lens. So when we have that perspective given to us, we are often told again and again, the Palestinians are terrorists. They're the ones who are the culprits in all of this violence. How do you respond to that perception here in the United States when you encounter it? Palestinians are terrorists. Jews are simply trying to defend themselves. End of story.
Rob, you want to take that one?
Yeah, well, this is the power of the empire, the power of propaganda, and I mean, if you talk to some people that are maybe pro-Zionists or pro-Christian Zionists, they'll tell you how unbelievably pro-Palestinian the media is. But if you go to the land and if you see things for yourself, you realize this is fundamentally not what we're told in the West. Some of you, I think, were on the call when we interviewed the doctor from England and from Great Britain, and she said she had to start speaking up because what they were being told back home was not what she was seeing. If I were to add one thing to what David said as well, the hilltops. Gary, I know you haven't been there for a little while now, and I'm not sure, Ross, the last time you were there. But we drove from Bethlehem to South Hebron, and every single stinking hill had a hilltop settlement or a settlement on it. Like every single one. I flashed a few photos there on the slides. I told Usama, I said, I'm getting tired of taking pictures of hills because every time you turn a corner, there's another hill with it. And they're all dotted with settlers. But those settlers are paid by the government. Now, we're not talking about economic settlers. We're talking about the ones who are establishing the hilltops are funded by the government. They're paid. They don't work. This is their job. It's to go take over these. So they are, and you saw the picture of Ben Gvir. They're armed by the settlers. So they're armed by the government. So the answer is, you can believe what you want to believe about the media or what have you. That's just the way it is. We all, but it's go there for yourself and see, or talk to people like us who've been there, and go. Yeah. This is. Sorry, the narrative you're being told is simply not true.
Right.
Yeah.
It's difficult to counter that narrative because then at least in the United States, you feel as if you're anti-Israeli,
exactly.
Which means anti-Jewish, which means anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another popular propaganda point being pushed by Zionists, very successfully, unfortunately. If you will forgive me for another personal plug, this is the subject of my newest book, The Power of Myth, Israeli Propaganda, and Christian Zionism. Yeah. Addressing your question, Gary, of what is the effect of this American propaganda in the West?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll have David on the live stream on Determined Truth, or a series of podcasts on Determined Truth here in the next month or so to discuss that book as well. So someone made a comment, in the comments, Palestinians being terrorists doesn't help your case. Hamas runs Palestine, and it's like, well, sorry, if you want to believe that, that's fine, but I don't think you understand the nature of what's actually happening, and that is the Palestinians are oppressed, and they are the people under oppression. I don't know if you want to add something to it, David.
Maybe this is
go ahead.
I just quickly, a book that Ross edited not long ago, Being Christian After the Desolation of Gaza. That book has an excellent chapter in it on Hamas, its origin, and the role that it has played in Gaza. I would strongly urge the person who made that comment to pick up a copy of the book and read that chapter by Daniel Benura.
Very good.
I was going to jump in also and just ask, there is a Palestinian Authority that ostensibly has responsibility for governing the people in the West Bank, not the territory. They don't control the borders or the airwaves or the water. And so we hear different things about the Palestinian Authority. I mean, it's led right now by a man who was the last elected some 25 years ago or so. Right, what did you hear about, what does the average Palestinian, Muslim or Christian that you spoke with, think about the Palestinian Authority? Are they in charge? Are they reliable? Are they trusted? Or
worse yet, are they so corrupt and they are self-dealing that they're to be blamed for the terrible conditions for Palestinians?
They're a large part of the blame. Yeah, they are horribly corrupt, insufferably corrupt. But from the very, very beginning of their establishment, they have always functioned as an arm of Israeli security. Right. They can't do anything that's not approved by Israeli security first. So they basically implement Israeli policies on Israel's behalf in the occupied territory. I'll give you an example of another friend of mine, well, the same friend I talked about before, who's been to prison and was being threatened and beaten. He was called in recently to the Palestinian Authority Security Center, and they threatened him. They told him, you need to stop doing your humanitarian work in these villages that you're helping. Because if you don't stop, we're going to send you back to prison again.
But it would
Just
be to a
to be clear,
Palestinian prison, not an Israeli prison.
It would be to the Israeli military prisons where Palestinians are held. Yes.
So the Palestinian Authority in this case is really doing the bidding of the army.
Exactly, which is their real purpose.
And it doesn't. Munther and I were discussing for a few minutes as well, and talking about how Israel, it might have been Munther, it might have been Usama, I don't recall, has kept, and David, you might have a better number on this than I, billions of dollars of money that's supposed to come into the Palestinian territories for distribution for government services, etc. And Israel is withholding that money as well. So there is this responsibility of Israel to, I think it's import taxes. I think, if I'm not mistaken, imports that come in, Israel charges a small fee, and then the rest of the money goes to the Palestinians, and they haven't dispersed that money. So you're looking at that ability, the inability to do their own services as well. But by the way, Hamas does not run the Palestinians, by the way, just for the sake of the record here. Hamas was elected in Gaza, but Hamas is not in power in the West Bank. So,
right, that's important.
Thank you. Well, as we wind down, I think a question I know that I have is just how do you cope with the emotional side of this? I mean, it's hard to hear your stories. Mm-hmm. But especially as you are sitting with people who are undergoing so much suffering, how do you manage your emotions? How do you as a Christian think about the place of anger? How do you think about fending off despair? Just interested in how you're coping with all of this.
Well, it's not easy, especially when you're with them. And you are in the midst of a conversation where you're hearing their stories and you're watching their tears. Of course, empathy is an important quality for any human being, but it's very difficult to control, particularly when I realize there's very little, if anything, that I can do to help. Mm-hmm. I can be with them. I can pray with them. I can love them as they have loved me over the past 20 plus years. But it's very, very frustrating to know that my country, the United States, gives its blanket support for Israeli apartheid, Israeli genocide. My friends suffer under it. And as an American, there's virtually nothing that I can do to help, other than to give them my empathy and my love. When I'm back in the United States, I write as much as I can about this to help educate people. I do speaking engagements when I'm able to try to educate people. And I've tended over the years to shut down conversations where I just suspect that there's no willingness to learn. Maybe I've become too quick to do that over the years. But just for the sake of my own emotional well-being and the efficient use of my time, I just will quickly disengage from people who are obviously hostile to the Palestinian cause. So that's one way that I've kind of evolved over the years to protect my own heart.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know how I feel a little bit because I was there a month ago texting you guys and saying, I don't know what to do. I mean, my first day was in Amman, and I'm meeting these two girls who were hiding out in the Catholic Church up in the north and hearing their stories. And as soon as they started talking, I just wanted to cry. It looks like, unfortunately, David. Oh, there you go. And then the next day I meet Saeda and her niece, and you're like, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. What do you do? Then you go to the West Bank, and you're amongst these people, and you just sit. The thing that makes it worse is the fact that my government, my church, my churches, my Christianity that I subscribe to is doing this. They're the driving impetus behind this. American votes, American support, American money, American military, American bombs. We have done this. And so you feel this level of guilt and responsibility. And then you feel overwhelming. Like, now I would add one thing to Dave, and I'm sure he felt the same way, and that is, the one thing that was amazing to me was how glad they were there how glad they were to see me. And it's like, what can we do? We can go, because going is bringing money, is bringing some revenues. And they would say, where are you from? And I'd say America. And I was consistently ashamed to answer that question. I didn't want to say America. I didn't want to say that. And so good. They were so happy to see me. And I was like, that's not not the greeting I was expecting. So go, show them support, show them love. But more than anything, we've got to let our congresspersons know this election coming up here in the fall is stage critical, because if we allow the current regime to stay in power, who knows what's going to happen? Well, I think we have a good idea what's going to happen. This is not going to be good.
So, Rob, you just said, so go. I would say the same thing.
Yeah.
And so a listener may be here with us and asking, how do I go? You've had a consequential pair of trips here, both of you. Do I go with my church who's having a Holy Land experience trip?
No.
I think we would all agree, no, that's not going to work.
Yeah.
So how does someone make the next step towards seeing some of the things that you have seen?
Well, David, I mean,
I'm thinking about Christ at the Checkpoint, for instance, at Christmas.
very good. Go ahead, Gary. You want to fill in on the details? You've been on the committee for that, so.
Well, there is a group of Christian Palestinians who have been putting together a conference for over 10 years in Bethlehem. And they're going to convene that conference just after Christmas this year, because COVID and the conflict in 2023 have stopped all of that. And so this is a very important gathering. You can find it online at Christ at the Checkpoint. Just search that and you'll find it. But I think the key is that here, not only do you hear Palestinians speak, but they have field trips. And the field trips are the key.
Yeah. A lot of people can't go, but what a lot of people can do is start finding out what's happening. You can go find Palestinians in your community. Go find Israelis too, or go find Jewish people as well, and talk to them, and hear their stories, because it's the stories that's going to change the deal. And start telling people whatever. It's time for silence is long past us. But yeah, if you can go to Bethlehem at Christmas time, that's a great way to do it.
Rob, I'll underline two things you said. One, again, about this conference, Christ at the Checkpoint in Bethlehem. They actually have an information session coming up September 17th, where you can get information about travel, logistics, safety, expenses. I will say our Palestinian friends who host this conference are deeply committed to the safety and well-being of travelers from overseas. And it's one of the best places to be, because you have people really attentive to safety and security, and with up-to-date information on where you can walk and what you have to avoid. The second thing is you mentioned talking widely to people in America. I'm thinking of Jewish Voice for Peace, for example, and other Jewish groups in America that are at the forefront of calling for justice and a just peace in Israel-Palestine. So, the Jewish community is arguing about this in ways that are similar to the Christian community. Perhaps what's lacking is that there are very, very strong voices, many in America, some in Israel, from the Jewish community, saying this is not Judaism, this is not our faith, this is not how we want to be in the world.
And Ross, I would add to that, maybe reading a book that you wouldn't normally read. There are faithful Christians who are writing about this, and so therefore locating their publications is a wonderful way to go. We've already mentioned David Crump has written, Rob has written, I have written, a number of people have written about this.
Ross has written.
Sorry, Rob, go ahead. Yeah.
No, you're good.
Yeah. Well, it's probably time to wrap up. And
Yeah, absolutely.
let me say thank you to David and to Rob for sharing
Yeah.
with us, even at the cost of calling up some really difficult memories and emotions. Thank you for going. Thank you for being a presence there. Rob, may I ask you to sort of give the customary
Sure.
sign off from this program?
Sure. Again, we want to thank you guys for tuning in. Of course, if you want to get more information, we want to encourage you to please subscribe to the Christian Forum in Israel-Palestine. Let me find the thing here. Page. Subscribe to it. Of course, you're going to get notified for alerts for any upcoming events there as well. Determined Truth also has a whole bunch of live streams and videos. We have a whole library full of videos that we've done there on the Christian Forum Israel-Palestine. On the Determined Truth page, there's actually a playlist for Christian Forum in Israel-Palestine. So subscribe, like, comment, share with others, let others know about the work that we're doing and the work that's going on there. So thank you so much. Thank you very much for us, and Gary for hosting, and David, thank you a lot. And I'll see you next week, David, as we record for your podcast to discuss your book as well. So, all right.
All right. Thanks, David. Thanks, Rob.
You bet.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Guys.